Welcome back. Now we answer questions we've received from you, our viewers. If you have a question, visit our website, QuranSpeaks.com. Dr. Shabir, the question here is, why do Muslim women pray behind men?
Well, this is how it is normally done, following the traditions as they have been established among Muslims. But there's nothing in the Quran that says that it has to be that way. So let's understand why this tradition evolves like this. So it may largely have to do with the nature of societies at the time in which the Quran was first revealed. In such traditional societies, men and women normally did keep their separate, like the distances from each other. Men gathered together with men, women gathered together with women. If a man is getting close to a woman, that might be cause for some concern. It might become scandalous in the society. That affected gatherings more generally. And when Muslims gathered for prayer, this was the norm that was established, that the men prayed separately from the women. Now, if you're going to have two separate groups praying, so now you can have different arrangements. You can have a side-by-side arrangement, or you can have one group in the front, one group in the back. Now, if you have the side-by-side arrangement, it seems that this was not working out so very well in Muslim experience. There is a narrative which probably is not authentic, like the story and the narrative didn't actually happen, but it shows the kinds of things which people thought were possible. Otherwise, nobody would narrate this, right? The narrative wouldn't get going. It wouldn't circulate. Nobody will tell each other that this actually happened if it was so unthinkable. But probably it didn't happen like this. But nonetheless, the narrative says that there was a woman who was so beautiful that though she was praying among the other women, who stood behind the men in prayer, the men were so enticed by her that some would deliberately try to pray in the back rows of men, so that when they bowed in prayer, they'd be looking at her, under their arms.
So funny.
Yeah. So I don't think it actually happened, but in the imagination of the narrators, this was possible. So with this kind of possibility in mind, people tried to cut the corners and make sure that there will be no scandal in the society. People wouldn't come for prayer, and instead of thinking about God, they're thinking about the other gender and so on. So the side-by-side arrangement would not have worked out with this kind of thinking in mind. So you need to have one group in the front, one group in the back. So which group in the front? It was thought natural that the men would be in the front, the women would be in the back, for a number of reasons. But one of the obvious things is that if you have women praying in the front, and the Muslim prayer involves bowing and prostrating on the floor and so on, getting down on your knees. So naturally, most people would think that if you're going to have one group in the front, then it better be the men in the front. Otherwise, men praying in the back, instead of thinking of God, they'll be thinking of something else. So that's how it evolved. That's how it became standard practice. But not everywhere. The simple exception to this is at the Kaaba, the most sacred site of Muslim worship. That is in Mecca, where Muslims circumambulate the house of worship. Because of that circumambulation ritual, and men and women having to do the same ritual, there is no separation during the circumambulation itself. So men and women are part of the same human stream, all flowing around the Kaaba. So they're there touching each other, rubbing shoulders and elbows and so on. And if the need for separation was an Islamic dictate, then you can see that God would have arranged this whole circumambulation ritual differently, because that's within the power of God, right? And God is giving us the legislation. And His Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is teaching us how to practice Islam. So if it was so like something taboo about it, that men and women could not intermingle, or they could not be in the same sacred space or anything like this, then that would be the right place to set the example once and for all that It cannot be done. Men and women have to be so separate. Maybe they have to be different times when women come in to circumambulate. Men have different times, and so on. Different ways of arranging that. But that has never been done. The fact that it's never been done shows that it's not unthinkable. If Muslims are comfortable as societies in arranging their prayers in a different way, this should be possible. Because when things are impossible, that's when, there is a clear dictate that says, you can't do this, or you must do it this way.
So there's no clear dictate within the Quran or within the Hadith?
Within the Quran, there's nothing even mentioned about this in the Quran, not to speak of dictate. And then in the Hadith, there is mention of this, but I do not recall that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is reported to have said that you must do it this way. What I recall is that the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, say that during the days of the Prophet, we used to pray like this. The men in the front, the women in the back, and the children in between. So that became an established and standard practice, and we wouldn't change it without good reason. But if communities are not comfortable with that and they want to change it for good reasons, then I don't see that this is a non-negotiable practice. And in fact, in the Toronto area, there is a place of worship where it is arranged side by side for men to pray on one side, women on the other side, and there is a pathway in between. So there are different possibilities if Muslims would accept that, but I have no difficulty with the traditional setting. It helps in a number of ways, especially with keeping the focus on the prayer. But it also sometimes might limit the women's participation in the society and taking active leadership roles within the community setting. A case in point may be that we might invite a government official or a politician to speak to the congregation. Now, such a politician or public figure would come to address both men and women from the front of the prayer hall. But when they do so, it means that they're only there for that moment. And if they can be there for that moment and they can be seen by the entire male congregation at that time, then we might ask, what's wrong exactly if men would see women in the worship setting? So different combinations are possible. The traditional routine stands as it is, and it's quite common. It's almost universal. And I don't have an inherent difficulty with that. And I'm not calling for us to change that. But I'm open in case Muslims want to have a different arrangement to say that, well, since there's nothing in the Quran that prohibits a different arrangement or insists upon the current arrangement, and since there is no dictate that I know of from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, insisting that it must be done this way, that it is possible to change that.
And of course, we're all equal before God wherever we stand in prayer.
Exactly. If the fact that men are standing in the front and women in their separate rows towards the rear of the mosque, this does not change the closeness that we enjoy as worshipers to God.
Thank you for your time, Dr.
You're
Shabir.
welcome. If you enjoyed this video, click like and subscribe. And please donate to support our work at QuranSpeaks.com.